this is the one thing that makes a lot of people just question what they're doing and then just give up.
Hey, I'm Jason Locklear, and today I'm going to interview Michael Phillip with Third Eye Drops. He has over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. He started as a podcast, now turned into a video podcast, and he's going to share some incredible advice for new creators, such as picking content topics, defining your niche, building a community, and monetizing your audience, and so much more. So make sure to watch this video. Michael is a very dear friend of mine. We actually just spent some time together going to an EDM show and a Japanese arcade where we got to dig into this rhythm drumming game. It was a whole lot of fun. I was actually there to celebrate him hitting that silver play button and hitting 100,000 subscribers. So I am just so excited to bring him on and share some absolute golden nuggets with you about growing a creator brand on YouTube. So let's get into it. This is Michael Phillip with Third Eye Drops. Your story is one of just grinding, tenacity, going forward, and just keep moving even when things weren't quite working out. And you've also, just so everyone knows, you've been doing this for a long time. It's not like, you know, like you had, well, I'll let you tell it, but I mean, it wasn't just the YouTube, right? It was other things before.
Right. So I've been doing an audio only podcast since 2015, I think. So I did that actually for, I think, until 2022 with no YouTube or very, very little YouTube. I think it was my plan initially to put everything out on YouTube, but there's this whole other obvious set of challenges that come with doing video. And I had a full-time job, as you know. So it was just like, I think I'm just gonna let the YouTube wither away and then just focus on the audio podcast, which a profound error on my part. It was a huge error. And it was an error because, so, you know, fast forward to 2022, I decided to quit that full-time job and go all in on YouTube and creating video content and turning the podcast into a video podcast. And that turned out to be the best decision I ever made creatively, but still doesn't mean that came easily and didn't come with its own set of challenges, for sure.
So you were doing the podcast for a long time. Then you broke into YouTube 2022, which is only about 2 years ago now. So how many subscribers did you have when you started, or you went back to YouTube and were like, I'm going to start uploading my long forms to YouTube?
I can't even remember. I think it was 1,000 or fewer. Wow. So actually, what's funny is the only video that I ever put out that did even remotely well was with you. And it was that it was that breathing. It was the Wim Hof style breathing exercise video that we did. That wound up doing pretty well. And that was only, you know, man, YouTube changes so much, so it's hard to compare anything from, you know, whenever that was, 2016.
It was 7 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
So I just looked it up. Actually, I was like, wow.
It's
just a goofy kind of video too. It's not. I mean, I'd say it's in the same vein of your content, but it was a different format for sure.
For sure. You know? Yeah. It was very tangential, but it turned out fun because it was just like, you know, there's a little bit of goofing around, but we also did something that people are interested in, that I was interested in. And I know you had never tried before. So yeah, we just did it. And it's just kind of like anything creative. Like you try it and see what happens. And that one pretty much went as well as you could possibly expect for like a few uploads in.
Yeah.
But that said, it took me a long time to ever see that kind of traffic again on the YouTube channel. So yeah, I did decide around 2022 to quit the job and go all in on YouTube and continue doing what I was doing in the audio realm. Yeah. But for the first, man, I don't know how many videos, but dozens of videos, it was just like bashing your head against a wall. It was like, you know, and just sometimes it felt like a rep where I'm just like, I don't know. Let's try it. Let's try it. Sometimes I felt great about it. Like, man, this is a good one. I'm really excited to put this out. And still just, you know, just like,
you never know, right? Like, you know, and I remember you going through those days, and it's, and I'm kind of in those days now, right? Yeah. Like I'm kind of in those days. Like, I mean, obviously I have some experience doing this for other people, like my brother, for example, but, never done it quite for myself or gone all in. And it's hard, man. Like just those first couple of videos, you got to put them out there, and you might spend 20 hours on a video, as you know, and then it gets like 200 views and you're like, you know?
Absolutely.
So how did you get past that? Like, how did you keep going? Was it because you quit your job and that was like, you were just like, this is like do or die? Or, you know, how did you keep pushing forward?
Yeah, partially I would say yes, because, you know, you sort of commit, obviously you just commit to something and you remove the primary obstacle. And then even when you're struggling, there's that voice in the back of your head that's like, you remove the obstacle. What excuse do you have? Like, get in there and push the. I don't know if you want me to swear or not, but you can bleep it. You can bleep it. Bleep it. YouTube. If you're worried about the algorithm, YouTube doesn't care about bleeping. As long as it's like censored, doesn't matter. I don't censor. I censor almost absolutely nothing. This is actually kind of an interesting question, because I'm sure a lot of people, you know, you as a creator, other creators, it's one thing just to decide, okay, my channel is going to be pretty PG. That's just what I'm deciding. But from a traffic standpoint, I don't think like regular use of profanity matters at all. Like as long as it's not in the first, like there's that, you know, you haven't gotten to this point yet, but when you do, once you can turn on ads, there's like disclosures that you put on in the ads. And one of them is like profanity. And there's like levels of profanity. And
there are levels of profanity, aren't there?
Right. Yeah. So the first one is basically like is totally fine for ads. And what that is like, you know, regular occasional use of profanity. And then in parentheses, it gives more specific direction. And it says, do you have profanity in the thumbnail? Do you say it in the first minute of the video? And if it's no, other than that, it doesn't care. So I've never had anything flagged for profanity, or like I've had a video or two over the years get a sort of, I forget what they call it, but essentially, you know, a video is either fully monetized, yellow, where it's there, you know, it's basically being titrated down pretty significantly, or red, where they completely remove the ad revenue for, you know, like a copyright strike or something like that. So I have had a couple of videos go yellow, but not because of profanity. So,
interesting that they would go yellow.
But yeah, it's interesting. And what's funny too is that video. So you asked what the kind of, you know, switching back to the main topic, you asked when that kind of ended for me. That video actually might have been chronologically the first one, and it didn't do well at first at all. But the one that did do well pretty quickly was, I believe it was, I get it confused. It's either the synchronicity video or it's the shadow video. Yeah. So I cover Carl Jung a lot on my channel. These are some of his most well-known sort of philosophical motifs that he talks about a lot. The shadow, synchronicity. So it's a topic I'm interested. It's a topic I knew a lot of people were interested in. You know, just doing not any kind of deep dive, but, you know, you just Google these things or search for them on YouTube, and it's clear that there's a built-in audience for these topics. And these are things that I was into anyway, like I said. And I felt like there was, you know, both good content out there and a lot of content where people hadn't thought very deeply about it or put too much really blood, sweat, and tears into the topic that I knew were there to be explored. So I knew I could add a little bit more than some of the stuff that I was seeing, or I could take a little bit different of an angle on it. So that's what really worked for me first. And whether that is, you know, it's hard to say, man, because sometimes it does just feel like a perfect storm of topic, of thumbnail, of timing. And you know, you can of course look at statistics and you can look at the aftermath of it, but you never know. Like if I published that earlier on, would it have done as well? You just never know.
You never know, right? And let's talk about that real quick. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about, is like your topic research, right? I mean, obviously you want to do things that you're interested about. That's what you said. I think that's huge because, you know, And it's worth being said because a lot of people will do topics just because they're trendy and not necessarily something that they may be interested in. How do you find the balance between that? Are there ever topics where you're like, well, here, let me ask you two separate questions.
Yeah.
How do you do your topic research? And when you're doing your topic research, are there any topics that you're like, I really love this topic, but I don't think anyone will care, you know, or the inverse, like, you know, this is an amazing topic. It's clearly just blazing. It's trendy, but I don't care about this.
Yeah,
you know,
totally, dude.
Like,
yeah.
How do you balance that and talk about how you pick your topics in general, you know?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So let me respond to that with a hypothetical question. If we're talking to people who are creatives in this video and who are thinking about making content or maybe even trying to make content full time, do you want to be making content that you don't care about? Do you want to be researching things that you don't care about? Like, the answer is no. Like, you're likely trying to get out of a situation where you're doing something you're not interested in so that you can do something you're interested in.
Very good point.
So I think, but that said, I think there's definitely a balance to be struck. You know, yes, there's stuff, you know, I'm into really niche sort of esoteric things.
Yeah.
And what I find is that, one, niches can be extremely specific. So you likely can take something that you would consider to be pretty niche and make it work, but it's about how you frame it. It's about the thumbnail. It's about the words you use in the title. And then you can, as long as those things are relevant to something that, with broader appeal, you can Trojan horse those things that you're really interested in into something that's going to do well on click-through rates and is going to, you know, look really good in a thumbnail. But also, yeah, man, there are topics that I don't really like, for instance, manifestation. That's a hugely popular topic. I find it to be sort of cheesy. I find it to be a way to really appeal to people's lower nature, at least usually. I think there are tasteful, better ways.
You know, I love that topic.
Right. Yeah. So that's one that I avoid, and it's
which
a
is
word,
okay, right?
Right. Of course. Yeah. I mean, and if you're listening to this, you're like, I want to make an entire manifestation channel.
Do it.
I was just going to say, do it, and do it, but I'm not going to watch it.
I will.
But
let's go.
But I think there are, you know, that aside, with the sidebar of, I do think there are tasteful and better ways to do it.
Right.
But yeah, so the answer is kind of a nuanced all of the above. Like, to review your questions, like, are there topics I just don't want to do that are popular?
Yeah.
Yes. Are there topics that I think are too niche that I'm really tempted to do and I avoid doing? Sort of, yes, but like I said, I think that there are ways you can Trojan horse even pretty obscure things into a topic that people are going to click on, and then you can convert those people into being interested in the weird or the weird stuff that you're interested in.
So can you give an example of that? And I kind of have one in my head, but do you have one off the top of your head?
Yes, I do. Yeah, for sure.
What are you thinking?
So my most popular video, by a pretty large margin at this point, is a video I did on Plato's Cave. Plato's Allegory of the Cave, you know, famous.
Excellent video, by the way.
Thanks. Thank you. However, I would say that if you look at the standard model of what most people would think of that works on a YouTube video, I did not follow that recipe. I chose to go deep. I chose to make it a pretty long video. I mean, the script, I know at some point, I don't remember what the final script was, but it was well over 10,000, maybe 12,000 words at the peak of it. Wow. And I think when I just shot the talking head stuff and then put the initial edit together, I was an hour plus in that video. And I'll be blunt. I'll say, like, I was coming off of doing another video or two that I put a lot of time in, and they did not do particularly well. So this was like a really important topic to me. Like, this is one of my favorite philosophical angles to think about, look at reality through. So I take this topic to be an almost like sacred level thing. So I'm like, I'm going to go all out. I'm going to go deeper than 99% of what I see on YouTube on this topic. And I'm just going to kind of push my chips forward and see what happens. And in this case, it wound up working. And there are a lot of things in that video that are pretty niche and topics that you're probably not going to read about or see anybody talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, probably outside of like a graduate level philosophy class or book written by somebody who's an expert on these things. But
after watching that, I 100% agree with you, man. I mean, you went deep diving on it, and just the way that you explain it, and you kind of throw in some humor too. Like, I don't think people just, that's unexpected. Like, I think you brought up MILF Manor or something like that. Yeah, that's really funny.
On the wall, they witness shadows depicting all sorts of things: animals, people, dramas. Season 1 of MILF Manor.
Yeah. But it wasn't like, over the top trying to be funny. You weren't trying to be anything. I think you were just generally interested in the topic, and you wanted to like really explain it in the way that you wish it was explained. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always, to a degree, there's so many competing pieces of advice on this. Like, the Rick Rubin advice. Have you read his book?
I have listened to most of it. I'm actually in the middle of listening to it. The Creative Act or something, or
something like that. I love it. I love Rick Rubin, but his advice is basically don't think about your audience. Like you're creating something that is coming through this unique prism of you. And if you're allowing the audience's opinions or hypothetical opinions to impinge upon your creative process, it's not clean, right? Like that's one extreme. The other extreme is just the opposite. It's like, what keywords are trending? Do exactly what people want. Think about the audience. And I kind of fall somewhere in between, and with the third sort of tertiary thing of how would I hypothetically want to have this explained to me? Like, would I like more humor? Would I like, whatever? And then all of that sort of congeals into a final product where I am thinking about what I really want to do. I am thinking about the audience. I am thinking about what I like, my own taste. And then that kind of becomes the final product. And I think the angle that really worked for me to get people in the door of that more nuanced topic is, that for anybody that knows that Plato's Cave story, one of the things that's really adjacent to that is the whole matrix or simulation sort of topic.
It's trendy, right? Like is that kind of the example you're saying? It's like something that's kind of trendy, but you wrapped it in something that was really not trendy, right? Like, who was talking about Plato's Cave,
right?
Not a lot of people, and definitely not on the level that you did. So, and I think, is that how you framed the thumbnail and the title too?
It was The Ancients Knew About the Simulation was the title or something like that. Or the ancients knew how to escape the simulation. That's what it was.
Yeah, they knew how to escape the simulation. So simulation is very popular, right? Even Elon Musk was tweeting about it. Or, and obviously the Matrix is huge, especially in your niche. But if you would have led with just like Plato's, like, I don't know, like how to get out of Plato's cave or something like that.
Yeah.
No one would have clicked.
Or how the role of intermediate forms and logoi in reaching the intelligible realm or something. Like I talk about that stuff in the video, but that's not high on the keyword list. So
no, but that's not high on the brain keyword list. I don't think most people even know those words in general. So Anyways.
So I think and you can, with all these things, man, you can be it's like a tightrope because one thing I wanted to bring up too on this topic of how do you choose what to make, because you're going to experience this eventually. You're going to have a video that does well, and you'll be super stoked, and I'll be stoked for you. But then the very next thing you're going to think about is, so do I make another video on this topic? And then what that eventually leads to, and I did this to some degree. Like I did a lot of content on Carl Jung, Jungian topics in general, and several of them did well. Several of them did okay. Some of them didn't do that well. And then pretty soon it's like, well, the algorithm understands you to be a channel that does things on this topic. You've built your audience around being a creative on this topic. So that leads to this phenomenon of audience capture, where you're now stuck in this habit of making a certain type of content. And then you're trying to figure out, like, well, what if I don't want to make that content anymore? But you also feel like you have to have some touch point that goes back to that content. So that's another thing that really comes into play, especially once you get past that initiation of, now I have one thing that did well. What do I do? Do I just keep doing that?
Right.
So that's another thing that requires nuanced thought and exploration and sort of negotiating with.
Yeah, and I've also experienced this at a very micro level. When I first started my channel, I was doing men's self-development. And I mean, I was like, ways to be confident, ways to how to dress better for short guys, because I'm a short king, baby. Let's go. And I put out that I guess in Japan I'd be like average of height,
right?
But in America I'm relatively short. But yeah, man, I put out these videos and they did okay. Like they got maybe 3,000 views for my first couple videos, which was decent, right? I mean, a lot of my videos now, the last couple videos I just put out, one got like 1,000, which was decent. Other one got like 200 as of right now, and that one took a lot of time to make. But there were different topics. I guess I started out with this men's self-development thing, and now I want to talk more about, the things I did for my brother, the things that I talk about with you about just being a creator in general. And it's hard to keep going when the first thing you did did okay, relatively well. Yep. And then the next thing you do, trying to break into, doesn't do very well. So what advice would you have for a creator that's going through that now, like me?
Yeah. And this speaks to the importance of why you have to do something you care about and that matters to you. Because, and I think this is the one thing that makes a lot of people quit. This is the one thing that makes a lot of people just question what they're doing and then just give up, because it makes sense. It hurts when you put a lot of work into something and it doesn't go the way you want it to go. I still deal with this all the time. But if you like what you're doing, you feel connected to what you're doing, you think what you're doing is important, you'll be like, well, what else would I do? I like doing this anyway. I like researching this stuff anyway. I like making this stuff anyway. It is a bummer when it doesn't go well, but this is who I am. This isn't just like content. This is who I am as a person. This is what I like. So there's nothing else that I would do or could do. So I'm just going to keep going. And that to me is the only way I've been able to do this for like a decade plus in one form or another. Is it's got to be coming from somewhere deep down. Otherwise, I guess the only other reason people would continue doing it is compensation, or just having the type of ego where they're like, I just have to be doing this even if no one cares. But yeah, man, I think that's the only sustainable way, is finding something you really care about that really speaks to you. And then that will begin to organically attract other people who are into the same things you're into.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I will say something I've struggled with as well is like, I'm into a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I like the men's self-development stuff because I like to, I like to dress well when I can. I like to, talk about those topics. It's not where I wanted to take my channel in the long haul, but it is something I'm interested in. So a lot of people have different interests. I mean, I like to do music production. I could start a music production channel if I wanted to. What about people that, I guess maybe they have a lot of interest, they don't know which one to pick? How do they blend those together and pick one? You know what I mean? Because there's, and there's this idea of this multifaceted creator of, this guy who likes, to make beats or whatever, but he's also talking about growing on as a creator. How do you blend those things and stay authentic to yourself with having multiple different niches, I guess you could say, like the niche of you, we'll call it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good way to think about it. Like there are things that I have my variety of niche interests too. Like
Music Diver.
Right. Exactly. And that's kind of what's cool about a podcast is you can dip in and out of whatever you want. Maybe I'm not going to talk about Japanese tech core EDM like very much on the podcast, but I might bring it up, and you can just be like,
Yeah.
you can do that. And I think that that's true, especially when you're just starting out. Do not give into analysis paralysis, where you're just like trying to sculpt this perfect imaginary thing at the expense of just not doing something. Like never allow the things before hitting the publish button to prevent you from hitting the publish button. Like that's the most important thing, is getting to that moment of, I've done it, it's going up, I'm taking a swing. Because it's cliche to say, but how many times have you heard, I didn't really expect this one to do well and it did well?
Right.
You never know. And I'm not saying it will do well, because likely you're going to fall on your face dozens and dozens and dozens of times before anything catches on. And I don't want to sound like I have zero sympathy, because I do have sympathy. I know what it feels like. But at the same time, I was grinding for years and years and years on an audio podcast. And my idea of, oh, this is doing pretty good, this is finding an audience, is completely different from what it is now.
Right.
So it's, my point basically is that struggle on one hand is subjective, success on one hand is subjective, but on the other hand, you just gotta, doesn't matter what your idea of either one of those things is, you just have to figure out how to get yourself to hit publish over and over and over again, first and foremost, I would say.
Are you trying to say don't obsess over your niche at first and just make things that you like?
Absolutely. And I think that there's, you definitely want to take everything into account, but don't let one thing become such an obsession that it's a roadblock. That I've seen that so many times too over the years, for sure.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And something that I wanted to talk to you about, and this kind of is a good segue into that, is what we're talking about is being authentic to yourself. Is being authentic, and how that's going to show up in your content. If you're out there just trying to make money content, I mean, I'm not judging anybody for anything they're doing, right? I mean, like if you want to go make a finance channel and you love finance, or maybe you don't like finance and you just know about it, whatever, I'm not judging anyone, but I do think there's a line that could be made about balancing authenticity and making money. And how have you done that? And do you want to talk a little bit about making money from your channel?
Sure.
Obviously, you had to make some money to quit your job, or you couldn't do it, right? You had to support yourself somehow. I guess there's a tension between staying true to your content and making money from it. Right. How do you navigate that balance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody has, this is another thing that's subjective, is like what counts as being successful to you? Is it just being able to pay your bills? Is it like, if I'm not making 200 grand doing this, there's no way I'm doing, that's really how some people think, I think.
That's what
For me, like, you know me, I have some nice things that I like. I like to go out to like eat a lot. I like to, whatever. I like to spend money, but I've always had a pretty, like, I would say moderate relationship to money, where I don't overspend. I don't like feel like I need to like drape myself in glamorous things.
Right.
So over the years, that allowed me to get into a position where I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm financially stable enough that I can now take this risk. So I don't want to seem like I'm some kind of just like absolute swashbuckling creativity, avenger over here who's like is willing to just like go burn down with a ship. To a degree I am, because I'm like,
right,
what else am I going to do with my life? Am I really going to spend all of my time slowly rotting doing things I don't like?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, my risk was calculated. Like I knew where I was at, and I knew that I wouldn't need to get to some outlandishly preposterous place for this decision to make sense. So with that out of the way, yeah, it's very tricky to make a living doing this kind of thing. And I don't mean to just be like a YouTube sycophant here, but as somebody who was doing an audio podcast for years, where, and if you're thinking about, I mean, podcasting is obviously becoming one of the most popular ways to make content. And I love it as a discipline and a way to express yourself. That said, doing just an audio podcast is significantly more difficult to make a living because you basically have two options: paywall of some kind, where it's you just got to pay money to listen to it, or to listen to extra content or whatever, or sponsors, or selling something yourself. Like those are pretty much the available routes. All of that requires a lot of work on the part of the creative that is not passive. Like you really need to be working with your community, making content, reaching out to brands, especially in the beginning when no one cares enough about you to be doing it themselves. On YouTube, you can just slowly grind to the point of monetization, turn it on, and you start making money passively without having to do anything. And that is huge, especially when the ceiling on YouTube is basically Mr. Beast. It's like you can
it's
go
unreal.
From,
it's just
like I
go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know what Mr. Beast makes on YouTube revenue alone, but I bet it's more than the highest paid athletes in the world. It's something insane.
It's insane. And obviously that's, and we, I wanted to talk about this too, because like Mr. Beast, there's actually videos out there of him showing his channels. This guy has like 30 channels. It's not just Mr. Beast channel. He has him in Portuguese. He has him in Spanish. He has Mr. Beast games. He has Mr. Beast takes a dump. I don't know. He has all these channels and he's scrolling through and every single one of them is making like $60,000 a month, $100,000 a month in just ad revenue, right? And just AdSense. That being said, we're not Mr. Beast, right? And a lot of people, they want to quit their job. They want to do this full time, like myself. How did you, obviously you can't just support yourself from ad revenue, right? You can. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about that. Like, when did you start getting your first ad revenue in your channel? I mean, I know it, gosh, 2 years to 100,000 subscribers is amazing. That's amazing. So I'm assuming it's going to happen before a lot of people do, but like, when was that? What did that look like? Did you just start getting trickle in? Did you get a video that just popped off? You got a lot of money and it just rolled, or what? What did that look like?
Yeah. So it was last summer is when, so not this summer of 2024, but the previous summer, because I remember I was traveling to a conference and I saw this spike and I was like, whoa, that's crazy, and then, I mean, I can like screenshot it for you. So you can, I mean, it's literally just kind of like you're cruising along at this little, sort of range, and then boom, like something really orthogonal and like exponential happens where it's just like, wow. And that was, the first video that did well. That was like like I said, the shadow video or the synchronicity video or whichever one it was. And then suddenly you're going from making like maybe a few $100 a month to like maybe making a few $1,000 a month. But then the question is, or again, you find out, oh, okay, that's just one time. How do I do this over and over again? How do I move the floor up? Because one video, more often than not, is not going to be the tide that lifts all boats. It will for a while, but it's like it'll do this and then it will plateau off almost every time. So you've got to figure out how to pull the rabbit out of the hat again. So once you start having multiple videos doing well at the same time, especially when so I make longer form content, which really helps too, because if you make a 15-minute video, you might have a couple ads. If you make a 2-hour video, you might have 10. So if you are doing that, then that's a lot different than making, having a like what's the cliche thing about shorts that everybody says? Like, I have a short with 87 trillion views and I made a cent off of it. It's like, because you can't run more than one ad or really any mid-roll ads on it. So you got to think about that for one. But also the question is really, it's a question of consistency. It's a question of course, views, and it's a question of watch time. So if you can, work into your strategy, and this is something I would recommend for you as somebody who makes shorter form content, is think about the upside of longer form content.
Yeah.
And then that comes with its own set of challenges too, because, okay, well, longer form content, probably not going to be as edited, probably not going to be as polished without a lot more work. So again, trade-offs, but
like, you know, you're doing a podcast though. I mean, it's such, you know, obviously the ones that popped off for you were ones that you edited like crazy. That was just solo.
At first, yeah.
Right. Okay. So have you had ones that have popped off that were minimally edited and they were just conversations that people like we're having today?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember which one. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Episode 1238.
Right, yeah. No, I'm only on 400 something, but
okay.
But yeah, no, I've, you know, for sure. I mean, and you know, for a while it was like, again, the audience capture of, do I just need to pivot to doing like 20 to 40 minute essay style videos if those are the ones doing well? But then eventually the podcast did catch up, and it's not my first or second most popular video, but it might be my third or fourth, or
nice,
and fifth, you know. So you certainly can, and then think about the views don't need to be as high to make a lot more money on those, because again, you're doing 10 ads on a podcast, maybe or whatever you decide to do.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you make more on 100,000 view podcast than you make on a 500,000 view short video like that. That's
and would you say podcast videos, I mean, obviously they're going to be lower effort to make than like a solo researched, like Plato's Cave type video.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You know, you're riffing, you're talking about whatever is interesting to your audience. And there might be some minimal editing, maybe some audio editing, but we're not dropping in a ton of clips, right? Or is it is it like that? I mean, how do you balance that? Is it more like how, I guess a better question would be, how long does it take you to edit like a video podcast compared to one of these longer form solo videos?
So it's not like it takes no time, because the way, and let me, this is a whole separate, you know, part of the conversation that's important, is what is your skill level and fluency in things like video editing, in audio, all of that stuff. But what ends up happening with any of this stuff is, more often than not, because you're a solo creative, you're doing everything yourself, and there's only like a level you need to get to just do it well enough. And that means you're not going to be the best at it. You're not going to be the most efficient. And I feel like I'm one of those people where I'm like, I know how to do what I need to know how to do. And I do try to continuously improve. But I think, you know, like, let's say there are AI plugins now that will run through a whole 2-hour podcast, and it will automatically switch cameras for you so that, you know, you don't have to do that yourself. I don't do that. That could maybe save me hours and hours. So right now I'm recording the episode. I guess you have to factor in all the, like, you know, going back and forth, just scheduling the stuff. You know, I'm dropping everything into Final Cut Pro. I'm going through, I'm switching cameras on, like, every time someone's talking. Sometimes I'm doing side by side if we're both sort of gesturing and I want to give a different shot. I'm doing an intro. I'm doing a little sizzler teaser thing in the beginning of every episode. So again, it's going to vary completely, but generally still, that is way less work than one of the researched videos, because the research videos are a lot of invisible time, right? It's sitting at a coffee shop, researching, reading books, listening to other podcasts, whatever I'm doing. That could take anywhere from a few hours because it's something I already really know and I'm just kind of getting it all down on paper, to, for the Plato's Cave video, I probably spent dozens and dozens and dozens of hours just doing that invisible part. And then
and dropping in the videos and the imagery to support, and creating those quotes, even just the, you know, stuff like that. I mean, that all those little micro details, that adds up. And I'm pretty sure you did it throughout the whole video.
Oh yeah.
Like, it wasn't just like the beginning, you had like these hooky stuff and then it trailed off at the end, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, yours, it was like the whole thing, you know, you had clips and supporting imagery and things like that.
Always. Yeah, always. That's just
Yeah.
what I've decided that I'm going to do, and I just do it. And yeah, so a ton of time in Mid-Journey, a ton of time getting B-roll, little tweaks, little effects I like to add to things. So yeah, I mean, it just takes a lot of time in my case, but that's just what I do. You know, there's a lot of people, I don't know, maybe it's some kind of nervousness on my part, but I'm not comfortable just really minimally. I guess I am, because that's really what a podcast is. But if it's just me, I feel more compelled to want to add more things and make it as enjoyable as I can.
And it worked, right? It worked for sure. Let's kind of change gears a little bit. I want to talk about your community, because you've done a really great job at building a community of people that are into the things that you're into. And do you want to talk about how did that start? How does that affect your brand and your content overall, whether it comes to guiding you and the things that you make for them, or just the conversations that you have with these people? How did you start building that community, and how does that impact your content?
There's been a lot of iterations of it, I think. You know, at first you just have to try things, you know, like I had a Facebook group, I have a Patreon, I have social media pages, of course. Like all of those things in some sense are ways to approach building community. And how do I want to answer this? Because on one hand, it's the most important thing, right? It's like you have to be, if you don't have a community, you really have nothing. But then the Rick Rubin angle comes in again, where it's like you cannot constantly leverage your community or depend on your community liking and co-signing everything before you do it. So for me, in the creative part of it, that doesn't come into my mind too much. Like I occasionally will query the community for things like, would you rather see this, or which thumbnail do you like better, or something like that. But usually it's just back to the authenticity point. It's just sort of whatever I'm into and decide I want to make something about, and then people kind of respond to it or they don't. So that's one angle of it. But the other angle of it is like, just once the people show up, interacting with them, like being there, creating obviously a rapport with them that, at least in my case, is totally genuine. Like a lot of these people, I'm like, I think they're really cool. I've joked around with some of my other creative friends, like, thank God my like closer knit community just doesn't suck. And they're like not people that I hate.
They don't. They're also, sorry to interrupt you, but I got to say, they are very involved in your videos. Like, I mean, your videos have like 2,000 comments, and they're not just like great video. It's like, you know, people, when they do leave a comment, they're leaving something in depth. Like it clearly touched them in some way, made them think about something. They're trying to have a conversation with you. They're not just trying to be like, great job, Michael, you know? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just want to say that your community is absolutely engaged. How did you do that consciously, or did that just kind of happen?
I don't think so. I think whenever you put something out that does well, and you know, in my case, like I'm talking about philosophical things and spiritual things, so there's an opportunity sometimes to like, thankfully, hit someone on sort of a deep level that I've succeeded on reaching. So I think that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, and I don't want to put any false expectations out there. So like if I do have a video with 2,000 views, there are 2,000 comments, there's going to be trolls. There's going to be people who don't get it. There's going to be people who I think are idiots or troll, or just people I don't, trust me, I like want to argue with, but I'm like, no, I'm not going there. So that is totally normal. Like the feeling like, well, both parts of like wanting to engage in a sort of negative way with negativity is always going to be there. Please don't do it. I've done it. It's never worth doing.
Don't feed the trolls.
Don't feed the trolls. And also don't feel like it's incumbent upon you to like illustrate how wrong someone is, because
Yeah.
one, that's going to be apparent to any moderately intelligent person anyway, and two, it kind of just doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
really end up doing anything for you, even if
Hmm.
you literally dismantle a person in the comments. So what?
Right.
It doesn't help you in any way.
It's going to
um
backfire.
so yeah, so I don't want to make it seem like it's just only 2,000 comments of pure positivity and
Hmm.
eloquently, constructed
Yeah.
soliloquies of praise or anything like that. It's all over the place.
Sure.
Um, but that said, there definitely is the core audience that shows up over and over again to the live chat, because I do like live drops of my videos. So there is that core audience that shows up over and over again. You start recognizing those names, and
Hmm.
I guess that's a good sign when you start seeing that happen.
100%. I think that is what a good community is people that are, coming together and around a certain topic, and then other people that just don't get it aren't in the community, right?
Right.
And that's fine. And you've built that. Let's talk a little bit about Patreon.
Sure.
So you've built that on Patreon too. Do you make content for Patreon as well? That
I would
for patrons only, or
I would
how
like
does
to
that?
do, yeah. I would like to do that more.
Yeah.
Initially, it was my plan to be like, I'm going to have just specifically patron content. And
Yeah.
for a while, I was doing like extra podcast and video content that would only go up there. But it became a pretty big barrier and inconsistent and sort of just like dropped off. But what I do now instead is like there are persistent things. So like patron Discord server, and hangouts on like kind of like this basically, but with a bunch of people that are patron only hangouts, book club, rewards that I send people out in the mail. So that's mostly what I'm doing on Patreon now. I think I could be doing more, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's tricky, because I do think getting people through that barrier is pretty challenging. Like
Right.
even people who are having tens or hundreds of thousands of downloads or listens on content regularly, it's a big barrier to get people off of one platform into Patreon and paying money. Like that's always going to be a big
Right.
barrier. So I've also though seen people very more successfully than me um, leverage Patreon very successfully. Like I know of a creator who she releases everything only on Patreon, and it's the paywall model, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh
and then
wow, she
there's
doesn't even have a YouTube.
right, nope.
She just
Or
has
if she
Patreon.
does, it's extremely minimal and has almost
Yeah.
nothing on it.
Interesting.
Um, yeah. So on I'll give her a plug because she's awesome. She's been on
Do
my
it.
podcast. She's got her Instagram is like Carl Jung memes or something like that. But
Okay.
she is really smart, does very very deep research. In her I think her Patreon's like Catabasis Anabasis or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of niche. I mean, it's another example of like
Mhm.
this is deep diving like psycho spiritual content, and she's making a living doing that on Patreon. So if you're doing good stuff and you're putting yourself out there, good things can happen and will happen. But it's also got to be a labor of love. And I mean, that you could never fake what she's doing. You could never
Right.
do that if you
Yeah.
weren't uniquely deeply interested in the things that she's interested in.
And part of that community is, you know, it's got to be like keeping you going a little bit, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just seeing that people actually care about the thing that you're into, giving you that feedback to keep going, and I think it's just so important. And that community aspect, whether you're actively like participating in it or not, I think, would you say it's a very important thing for a YouTube channel to create, or we'll call it a brand or a creator brand to create
Mm-hmm.
and foster?
Yeah. And even on just like a more personal level, you want to give people the opportunity to come closer, right? And there's
Yeah.
really easy tools to allow you to do that now that are like
Mhm.
mutually beneficial, because obviously the the audience wants to support and they want to know you, and things like Patreon or like YouTube members are just like there for you to toggle on now at a certain point at least, and you can just create those spaces to actually, all the way on up to the level of like becoming friends. And if you don't want to get that close, you can just here's some extra content and I don't even talk to you. There's people that do that too. I have a close friend who tries to be pretty like hands off and doesn't like to let people get too close. So there's different ways to approach it. I'm pretty personal on there. I mean, I'll DM people sometimes. I'm in the Discord myself all the time. I'm obviously, like I said, I'm on Zoom with people just hanging out every month. So yeah.
That's super cool, man. Well, I think you've built something really amazing. Let's talk about the future for you. Like, do you have any big dreams or directions that you want to take your current Third Eye Drops brand, channel, audience, community, you name it? What's next? Or what's your moonshot goal? We'll call it.
Yeah. I mean, well, on one hand, it's like some goals seem huge, and the relative, like having that plaque back there, like I thought that was going to be, it seemed like such a distant goal even a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Or a year ago, it seemed like a really distant goal. But on the other hand, you get there and it's just, you still see all these people who are like leagues ahead of you in terms of audience, in terms of every aspect of what they're doing.
Of course.
So you realize you're just going to continuously feel like a small fish in a massive pond, I think, on YouTube or in the world of creativity in general, which is cool because that means the ceiling is high and you can keep growing. But for me, I think that looks like, I would love to have more in-person podcasts with like a studio. I would love to have people I work with that are actually like experts in doing something that I'm just fluent enough in that I'm doing myself. I would love to get to that point of having like a team where we're like brainstorming and we're all super into the same topics. I feel like I'm not quite there yet, but I'm hoping in the next year, those things can become real. And then I think once you get to a point like that, it's incredible what just a few passionate people can do together. Like I really think the sky is the limit, and you're reaching levels that are hard to reach on your own. But that said, man, there's so many people that just sit in front of a camera alone and like make it to millions and millions of followers. That's totally possible too. So
that's true.
So on one hand, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. On the other hand, I'm always kind of thinking bigger, like what's the next bigger thing,
I'd love to see you in a room with other people. And I know you've done that before. You've done that on other podcasts and things like that. But I've heard, you have obviously the experience here with this, but there's just a different vibe being in the room together, just, riffing off of certain things. And like the Joe Rogan, we'll call, everyone's probably thinking of that right now. Like he has, when you say community, let's like explain that, like, or not community, but people that you're working with, right? Are you talking like a video editor? Or are you talking like a Jamie that like Joe Rogan has, or like somebody else that's co-hosting with you, riffing or researching these topics to inject some sort of other angle that you wouldn't have thought about?
Yeah, I think
just
both.
All the above.
I think both. There are elements of this stuff that I don't love, but are just part of it. That would be cool to completely hand off, like any of the business stuff and, sort of emails and stuff. No one really loves that. So, I mean, everything,
like logistical stuff, like scheduling and
okay, talking to sponsors, like all of that stuff, not, just being able to be like, here, sign this. And that's really it. Which honestly, there's not too much more involved in it than that for me right now, but but also for sure, like people who are physically there and, that I'm like kicking it with and sitting at a table with, and we're brainstorming and laughing and, all of that kind of stuff. Like for sure. I miss that. I miss that kind of a, the fraternal vibe. Like you and I both grew up playing in bands, and there's like, there's definitely negatives to being in the same room with people, like creatively sometimes too.
Oh
Like
yeah.
there's a lot of tension. There's a lot
Too
of
many
like,
cooks in the kitchen kind of thing,
right, like
you know?
unsaid things and vibes
Mm-hmm.
and stuff that I think
Mm-hmm.
come with anything that people are invested in. But I mean, dude, I mean, those are some of my closest friends ever that were like,
Oh yeah.
it's
And
like being in a
the creative
relationship with,
energy that you
yeah,
get. Oh, it totally is.
yeah,
Like the creative energy that you get from like just rocking out together. You'll get to the point where you kind of know where they're going to go with the drums and like you go there with the guitar or whatever
yeah,
it is. I feel like it's kind of the same concept. It's
totally.
just that physical like energy and that riff. I hope you get there, man. I think you will. I would love to come hang out. I don't know if I'm smart enough to be on your podcast, to be honest, but I could be like, the guy from the Tom Green show sitting in the back laughing hysterically or something if you want. But
Well, the thing about you though is you have a lot of strengths that I don't have. Like you do dive into things I think more organically, deeply than I do. I have to be like pretty inspired, I think, to go to like really technical levels with things. And it's some, you may or may not keep this in, of course, but you and I both worked in like a technical field. And I think there's part of you that really likes tinkering, and you like learning software, you like
mm-hmm.
learning tricks and going to levels that I'm sort of just like, I don't, this is good enough and I don't need to go there. So you have like these strengths that I don't have for sure. So
Thanks,
but
man.
I think that's true of everybody.
Yeah. And thanks, man. Well, I think this is really valuable for people just to, especially people like myself that are just kind of getting their creative journeys going on YouTube, we'll call it. And do you have any just kind of overall advice? Like, what would you say? Let's ask a very specific question here.
Mm-hmm.
7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
When you did the video with me, what would you want to tell little Michael Phillip?
Yeah. Basically all of these ideas that you have about, well, I think people are probably going to have ascertained this by now that I go pretty philosophical and romantic with things. So I'll preempt what I'm about to say with that. But
Take your time. That's
I
okay.
think if you're feeling the pull inside of yourself to do something creatively, that is like a very real, raw part of what you are on a deep soul level that's looking for some kind of very unique catharsis and expression.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean it's like your destiny to be some wealthy creative. But I do think it means that there's something absolutely singular inside of you that you can express through creativity. And that is what something deep down inside of everybody, I think, wants. And if you trust that thing and you plow forward through obstacles and through uncertainty, I think it will be the most rewarding and important decision you ever make in your life. And that's what I would tell myself. And I would say, don't doubt, well, not even don't doubt yourself. Go ahead and doubt yourself, but just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Stay dedicated to the process. Keep trying to get better. Keep trying to listen to that thing in you and not just do what you think other people want you to do or what you think is trendy. Like listen to the thing inside of you and don't listen to the negativity of others. Don't even listen to the positivity of others too much because that can lead you astray too, especially once you have something that does well once or twice. Like that becomes dangerous. But yeah, trust yourself, trust that feeling inside and try to get better at listening to that thing and letting that work through you and become who you are. That's my most important piece of advice, I think.
That was huge. I love that. I mean, that kind of reminds me of a quote that I'm going to absolutely butcher right now. But it was listen to the whispers on the wind or something like that. And just the idea that you have those whispers, you have those feelings and those, if you're a creative, you have that, there's something in you just kind of tugging at your heartstrings, that you should be doing this. And maybe you're not doing it right now. Maybe you're spending your time playing video games when you know you should be making a video or whatever, or we'll call it stuck in a job that you don't necessarily like to do, but you have that burning feeling inside of you. Listening to those whispers that your mind gives you, I think is just so important. So I 100% agree with that. And that's great advice, man. Thank you.
That's beautiful. It, man. And that's not just advice for the people listening. That's advice for you. That's advice back to myself.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, man, thanks for having me.
You got it. Where can people find you? Where can people subscribe, like, comment, and watch esoteric vibe videos?
I guess it's Third Eye Drops with Michael Phillip now. I added my name to it. So that's what it is on YouTube. Okay. And then I think all the socials are just third_eye_drops, or at least that's what Instagram is, which I'm most active on. Like the
Instagram,
Twitter and stuff's not even really worth mentioning at this point.
Yeah. So Instagram, you got the YouTube channel. Obviously, you're on Spotify, you're on Apple Podcast, everything. So everything, we didn't quite talk about that much, but it's basically a podcast that also has a YouTube channel video component, right? I mean,
yeah.
A lot of people are just listening to the podcast on audio, and a lot of people are listening to them on YouTube, I'd imagine.
Yep.
Check them out. Third Eye Drops. Thanks, buddy. And I love you.
Love you too, brother.
I hope to come visit you again pretty soon. That was very fun.
We were just kicking it in person. It's a good time.